Have you ever been home alone at night during a storm and felt the icy tendrils of fear creeping up your spine? Picture this: a typical suburban home nestled between others just like it. The neighborhood is quiet, a silent witness to the evening's events. Tonight, the weather is not on our side. The sky growls menacingly, and the rain beats relentlessly against the windows. The power, a victim of the raging tempest, has surrendered, plunging the house into darkness. In this house, our protagonist finds themselves alone. A normal evening of solitude has now turned into a chilling night of uncertainty. Every creak of the house, every howl of the wind, sends a shiver down their spine. They're home alone, but the storm outside makes it feel as if they're sharing their sanctuary with an unseen entity. The flickering candlelight casts long, dancing shadows, transforming the familiar into the eerie unknown. Our protagonist tries to shake off the unease, the creeping sensation of being watched. They reach for a book, hoping to distract themselves from the quiet whispers of their fear. But each word on the page seems to morph into a sinister tale of its own, feeding their imagination with the horrors that could be lurking in the dark. The book drops from their trembling hands, the sound echoing through the silence, a stark reminder of their solitude. The storm outside mirrors the turmoil within them. The once comforting rhythm of the rain now sounds like an ominous drumbeat, like a countdown to an unwanted revelation. Their heart pounds in time with each flash of lightning, their breath hitching with each rumble of thunder. Every cell in their body is on high alert, their instincts screaming at them that something isn't right. They try to shake off these feelings, attributing them to the storm and the darkness. But the nagging sense of dread refuses to be ignored. Fear, once a mere whisper, now screams in their ears. They're alone, but they can't shake off the feeling that they're not the only one in the house. As the storm raged on, little did they know that their worst fears were about to become a reality. Do you believe in the supernatural? Our protagonist didn't, until that fateful night. As the wind howled outside and the rain pelted against the windows, a distinct feeling of unease began to creep in. The house, typically a haven of warmth and safety, suddenly felt cold and exposed. The protagonist tried to shake off the feeling, attributing it to the weather and the unsettling quiet that comes with being alone. But then, strange things started to happen. Doors creaked open when they were sure they had been closed. Lights flickered sporadically, and objects seemed to shift from their original places. It was as if the house itself was alive, reacting and responding to an unseen entity. The protagonist, a rational mind, tried to make sense of it all. They blamed the wind for the doors, the storm for the lights, and their own forgetfulness for the moving objects. But the harder they tried to rationalize, the more they couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched, of being not quite alone. The air became heavy, as if charged with an unseen energy. A cold draft swept through the house, raising goosebumps on their skin. The sounds of the storm outside seemed to fade into the background, replaced by an eerie silence that was occasionally broken by a soft whisper, a distant giggle, a faint footstep. Yet our protagonists continued to dismiss these occurrences. They told themselves it was the wind, it was the house settling, it was their overactive imagination playing tricks on them. But deep down, they couldn't fully convince themselves. The feeling of dread was creeping in, wrapping around them like a cold, wet blanket. As they moved from room to room, switching on every light in the house, they couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. Every shadow seemed to move. Every reflection held a hint of something more. Their heart pounded in their chest, the drumming echoing the ticking clock, counting down the minutes until morning. But as the night wore on, it became clear that this was no figment of the imagination. What would you do if you came face to face with your worst nightmare? Imagine the chill that runs down your spine when you're in a pitch-black room and you sense something. Not just anything, but something that shouldn't exist. Something that lurks in the shadows of your deepest fears. That is exactly what our protagonist experiences in this terrifying encounter. As they navigate the darkness of their home, they feel a sudden shift in the atmosphere. The air grows colder, and the eerie silence is broken by a bone-chilling growl. It's not a sound you would hear from a human or an animal. It's something far worse. With their heart pounding like a drum, they turn around, and there it is. A dark, monstrous entity, its appearance so horrifying that it could drain the courage from the bravest of hearts. Our protagonist is frozen, petrified by the pure terror that fills their soul. But as the entity lunges towards them, adrenaline kicks in, and they manage to escape its clutches. They run, stumble, and hide. Their breath comes in ragged gasps as they cower in the darkness, praying that the entity doesn't find them. Yet, the entity is relentless. It prowls around the house, its presence a haunting echo in the otherwise silent rooms. The protagonist can feel its malevolent energy seeping through the walls, making the hairs on the back of their neck stand up. Each creak of the floorboards, each gust of wind, each shadow carries the threat of the entity. The protagonist is trapped, cornered in their own sanctuary. Their home, once a place of comfort and safety, is now a labyrinth of terror. They're alone, with no one to hear their screams, no one to come to their rescue. The protagonist was trapped in their own home, with nowhere to run. When pushed to the edge, humans can display an incredible will to survive. This truth was about to be tested in the harshest of ways. Our protagonist, driven by pure survival instinct, began to formulate a plan to escape the house that had become their prison. With breath held and heart pounding like a frantic drummer, they moved meticulously, each step a calculated risk. The house, once familiar and comforting, had transformed into a labyrinth of fear. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow cast by the flickering lights, was a potential threat. Yet they persevered, their determination fueled by the primal need to survive. The plan was simple, but audacious. They had to make it to the back door, through the pitch-black kitchen, and into the moonlit backyard. The entity, a lurking menace, seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. It was a game of cat and mouse, with the stakes as high as they could be. The protagonist moved, their every sense heightened to a razor's edge. The house was eerily silent, the only sound their own breath, ragged and labored. The kitchen was just steps away now. With a final burst of courage, they dashed across the room, the back door just within reach. But then, a sudden chill, a whisper of dread that seemed to freeze time itself. They could feel it. The entity was close, too close, but retreat was not an option. With a surge of adrenaline, they flung open the back door, the cool night air a sharp contrast to the stifling fear that had filled the house. They were outside, free from the house's oppressive presence. The moon shone down, casting long shadows across the backyard. The protagonist didn't stop to relish their escape. They knew the entity was not bound by walls. They had to keep moving, to put as much distance between themselves and the house as possible. In the face of terror, they had survived, but the night was far from over. The escape had been successful, but the threat still loomed large. The protagonist was out of the house, but the true horror of being home alone at night was only just beginning. When the sun rises, it brings with it a new day, but it cannot erase the horrors of the night. In the cold light of dawn, our protagonists found themselves standing amidst the aftermath of a night that would be forever etched into their memory. The safety they had once found in the walls of their own home had shattered, replaced by a chilling unease that seeped into every corner of their sanctuary. The night had left its mark, and the echoes of the terror still lingered, a haunting melody playing on repeat in their mind. Their heart, once a steady drum, now danced to an erratic rhythm, the beat of their own fear. The mundane had been tainted, everyday objects now tainted with the memory of the night. The couch, where they had once lounged carefree, was now the spot where they had hidden, breath held, praying for the nightmare to end. The kitchen, once the source of comforting aromas and warmth, was now a battleground, filled with the echoes of their desperate struggle. The protagonist, who had once reveled in solitude, now found the silence oppressive, the emptiness of the house a constant reminder of their vulnerability. As the days turned into weeks, they found themselves unable to stay alone. The once welcoming solitude had been replaced with an oppressive silence, the quiet now a deafening reminder of their ordeal. The memory of that night clung to them, a dark shadow that refused to be shaken off. Each creak of the floorboards, each gust of wind against the window pane, was a brutal reminder of the terror they had faced. Sleep became elusive, their dreams invaded by the echoes of the night. In the end, our protagonist was safe, but changed. Their home, once a haven, now felt like a cage. They never stayed home alone again, the echoes of that night forever etching a haunting melody into the silence. This is a chilling reminder that sometimes our worst fears can be closer than we think.